Welcome to Think Tank, where our diverse leaders tackle your diverse challenges. Today, we're looking at what happens when white people direct equity work. I'm your host, Kelly Macias, Associate Consultant for Ray Coach. Won't you join me in welcoming today's savvy and stylish think tankers? Think tankers, tell us who you are and where you're calling in from.
Hi, I'm Robin Ingram, Assistant Vice President at the Fund for Johns Hopkins Medicine, calling in from Baltimore, Maryland.
Hello, my name is Damon Packwood. I'm the Creator and Executive Director of Gameheads, calling in from Oakland, California.
Hi everyone, my name is Asha Mehta. I have my own consulting practice in leadership development for feminists of color, calling in from San Francisco.
Thanks for joining us today, everybody. So here's today's challenge. Dear Think Tank, I am a Black woman who has recently taken a staff position doing equity work at a global organization after working as an independent consultant for some time. My boss is a Black woman, but her boss is a white woman. It seems like all the strategic direction about my work comes from the white woman, my boss's boss, and of course, I disagree with the majority of it. It seems like they want me to do very surface-level equity work, write statements about the organization supporting Black lives, do a light touch unconscious bias training. But when it comes to challenging white supremacy in the organization and naming systems of oppression, I am shut down, labeled as disagreeable, or told that I haven't been in the organization long enough to make such observations, despite being a professional in this space for 2 decades. I'm fed up, but also wondering why white women are so often in charge of deciding what is and isn't good equity work. Help! Signed, why won't they just let me be? All right, Think Tankers, I'm curious. What have you got?
Ooh.
Can I throw out something that I don't know if this is taking it in a different route or not, but is it, I feel like, how do we help not white people who want to do this work and are trying to be good allies? I guess the question is, how do we help them? I think that there may be some people that are blinded and they're not really digging in. They're not trying to do surface, they're not trying to do the deep work. But then it sounds like some are. And are we quick to label people just because they're white trying to do the work? How do we dissect that, I guess? And I'm sorry if I'm taking it in a different direction. But I just don't want to always assume that if they're white doing the work that they just don't, they're not trying to do it in a passionate, right way.
The first thing that comes to mind is, well, have you spoken to the person that supervises you and the person that supervises them first about what your concern is? I mean, I was immediately triggered from past experiences of things like this happening to me, where it was in fact a reality, but it was a process to get there, and that process definitely starts with finding a way to communicate to your superiors and doing so in a way that's not accusatory, right? To the point that you made earlier, because people will get triggered by stuff like this. I think that probably if there's one thing I would reframe in that question is to think about the issue and criticize or provide feedback on the way that the organization is tackling the issue, and don't make it about the individuals, because especially if it sounds like she's third on the totem pole, that could be a problem for their job.
I'm feeling this issue. I feel like I've experienced something like that, and I'm hearing that first check from you all about the right, sort of minding our triggers. First and foremost, minding our generalizations, our triggers. But the thing that got me in this one was how she named that the leadership wants her to do sort of statements and things that sound very comfortable. And I've experienced that. It's sort of like when we're trying to do challenging work around racial justice or equity, and people want to keep it at diversity and something comfortable, because when it gets uncomfortable, it starts to challenge them, and so I really feel that. And I also, it kind of reminds me of some work I did with this environmental justice leadership work around people of color and in leadership, and a leader telling me on the ground, I'm tired of organizations who are just addressing the cosmetic problem, where they just want it to look right. They want the right colors, but they don't want to change their agenda. And she's like, I'm fine with people being an all white organization if they're following base building frontline communities of color in their leadership, because maybe then you're going to draw the people of color instead of just hiring them to put some, lipstick on a pig is sort of what I call it.
For me, I was actually sweating a little bit as I read this scenario, because it's happened to me a lot in organizations, which is part of the reason why I work independently. So I was really drawn to Damon's point around separating out the individual and the issue. I think what's hard about that in racial equity work or equity work in general is that so often we're thinking about systems and structures and impact based on different types of identities. So I wonder what it looks like to separate out the issue, right? This is a Black woman who is doing equity work and feels like the strategic direction about the work is coming from a white woman, and presumably feels that this white woman may not be best positioned to determine the direction of the work. So for me, the question is, how do we separate out the issue from the individual when we know that there is an impact by group identity? I'm curious, what do you all think about that?
The truth is, we've all had these experiences before. And I think that when I first had these experiences, I did not go to anybody and talk to them about it. And then in another position that I was in at a previous organization, I did go to my direct supervisor, the Black woman on the team, talked to them, and then spoke to people. It ended up resulting in me leaving and starting my own organization. So you're right, you know what I mean? Like, how do you separate the two? Because the truth of the matter is, as a person that wants to do racial equity work, you need to be working on yourself all the time, right? Definitely. And if you're a white person, you need to be working on yourself all the time. Like, you need to be doing that work constantly.
Absolutely.
And there's no problem with that. There's no shame in that. I know people who do the work constantly, and we can tell the difference. Like, we can tell the difference between people who do the work constantly and people who don't. And so, that could be what this person is picking up on. They could be picking up on somebody who's not doing the work, and as a result, not open to some of the suggestions that this person is giving. So I'm always an advocate of like communicating and getting clarity first. But I'm all for going ham when you get that. When that phase is over with, I am all for going ham. So I definitely hear what you guys are saying about. I did jump ship and start my own business because I was like, I don't want to do this kind of work.
Yeah. Damon, your point actually reminds me of, or is a nice tie to what Robin said around the maybe making assumptions sometimes around white allies not being true allies or not doing their work. And so it feels like there's a connection between, one, knowing that you always need to be doing your work, and maybe recognizing when others are doing their work, or recognizing when we might be triggered, right? Just because of our own experiences and our own identities in the world.
One thing that's coming to mind is the non-optical allyship. And, the optical is all of the surface stuff, like I'm going to tweet a quote on MLK Day or send an email or, do the things that aren't really going to impact change. But the non-optical is really focusing on the change and the root of cause and is really the hard work. And I think that in working with people, one, we can't separate our experiences sometimes, right? Like our experiences make us who we are. And, you know, those experiences living as a Black person or a minority or someone else, like you can't step out of that, right? You live it every single day. But one thing that is powerful is sharing those experiences. And I think that can also help other people who may not have it kind of at least get some sense of what it's like, and then also understand why it's so important to engage in things that are not just surface, but are really deep and going at the issues.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going on a limb here, but I kind of feel like we're giving a lot of benefit of the doubt to this white person before we're really empathizing, not before, but I also really want to empathize deeply this feeling of somebody having control and power who's a white woman who's not listening to the wisdom of the Black woman. But I'm also, the missing link for me is the supervisor above her, and where these two Black women, where are they building solidarity? Where are they building alignment in their conversation? And I'm curious about that, but I kind of like want to take some more energy empathizing and figuring out, you know, just giving that, like the ham, you know, you're like, go ham, like the clarity is there. I don't exactly know what that means, but I kind of get it. You know, it's like, so what does that look like? If you get the clarity and we feel like, okay, yes, you know, 100% this is happening to the woman, to the Black woman here, then what? What do we do with that clarity?
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's important. You know, there's two ways to think about it. There's one in like, if I was sitting down with this person, I'd say, look, do you want to process, or do you want to game plan? Like which one? Because there are two different ways to approach this. One is like you process it and then you decide whether you want to deal with it or not. And another one is like, how do I just sort of game plan this? And I think one thing that and I was in the very same situation where my direct supervisor was a Black woman and her boss was a white woman. And we were doing things that, were just really peculiar. And everybody that I worked with, that were at my level felt the same way. So, I did approach my supervisor and say, hey, like, is this really, we can't say that we stand for racial equity and do this kind of work, right? Like, it's just that that's not racial equity, right? This is very cosmetic. It's very surface level. And process-wise, what we eventually decided to do is bring in a mediator to work with the team, right? It was masked as a team building exercise, but it was designed to figure out where we all were, right? Getting back to kind of like personal experiences and things of that nature. And the thing that was illuminating about the experience is that we had a team of maybe 8 or 9 people. It was the CEO of the organization and the COO, which were the 2 white women at the top of the organization. It was very clear after this sort of team building exercise that they were on the out from the rest of the team, that it was their opinions that were actually radically different than everybody that they hired, right? And it was important to expose that to everybody, for them to realize that the synergy is not like, I'm not breaking up the synergy, you two are actually breaking up the synergy. Everybody thinks this way and you two don't. And that was the beginning of the organization changing, and it really, a lot of people kind of realized that there was a problem with the organization, and they started to do things in agreement with the way I had felt, right? So in that moment, I wasn't by myself. I wasn't necessarily getting support from my supervisor, definitely not the CEO, but the rest of the people in the organization did. And then, collectively we all quit. But the point is that, this person is writing about people that are, quote unquote, above them, and maybe they need to be thinking about getting, some ally work or some solidarity with people, with other people within the organization.
Yeah. That's about all we have time for, but I will echo the need for solidarity in specific parts of the organization to be able to move your agenda forward and to also feel supported. So thank you, Think Tankers. I just want to recap what we've heard. We've heard a lot of rich things today. We've heard being careful about the assumptions we make about different allies, and potentially talking to the person, speaking to someone in a way that centers issues and not necessarily personality or the individual. We've heard about being cautious about giving the benefit of the doubt to white folks who are in charge of racial equity work, and really acknowledging the difficulty and pain that is experienced by people of color who are doing racial equity work when they encounter those kinds of barriers. We also heard sharing experiences, making sure to share specific experiences maybe with colleagues that can offer some insight into how you're experiencing. And then we talked into what you're experiencing. And then we talked about allyship and the need to find allies, the need to build support and solidarity across different levels within the organization. So thank you so much. Thank you to Why Won't They Just Let Me Be for writing in. And viewers, please remember, if you have an issue that you want us to discuss, send your challenge to ThinqTanq@raycoach.com. That's ThinqTanq with Q's. Take care, Cuídense, and remember, you've got this and we've got you.